let's talk about the best practices of building project templates today. Woohoo! Hello, my name is Colleen Baldry. I'm a growth marketing specialist for Movola. Very lucky of me. I get to be here with you guys in the webinars every month. I'm also here with Daniel Clarkson. He's from Mainstay Technologies and he's a project manager. And looks like Daniel oversees project success for each of Mainstay's clients. It looks like he has a ton of experience with a bunch of different types of projects with different organizations. So awesome. Sounds like Daniel's a great person to ask questions about projects too. Then can't forget to talk about Lewis here. We got Lewis Bag Donuts. I know his name because I think of Bag of Donuts. He's a senior program manager for MSPs at Movola here. He has extensive experience in onboarding our clients, and he's super knowledgeable about project management also. So I will let these two start engaging in their great conversation about project templates, and I will beat it. But if you guys have questions, you can leave it in the Q&A or you could send it in the chat. We'll be watching.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Colleen. And you do, honestly, you will have to keep Daniel and I honest because we can go off on
We'll keep
tangents.
going.
Yeah, we will.
This is a 4-hour webinar. Did you guys realize that?
Yeah.
I'm excited for that.
Our prep call for this webinar, we talked about everything for 50 minutes. So please keep us honest. My fun fact, right, since you called me out, Colleen, again, like a lot of facts about the hunt for the great panda back in 1929, which is crazy. We used to just go out and kill things and stuff them and put them in museums. Whole thing about pandas. But my fact is there's a vulture in Western China, the bearded vulture. That's one of the only mammals and vultures that specifically eats animal bones. And it has an acid in its stomach that breaks down bones, and it'll fly the bones like way up high. It'll drop them so that they break so that it can specifically get to the bone marrow too. So that is my fun fact for today. Bearded vulture. Yeah, you're welcome. Anyway, on to other more fun things, templates. So Daniel, we know you are super busy. We appreciate you taking the time. I know we've been trying to get you on here for a while. We've been lucky to work with you and Mainstay for a good bit too. And again, everybody, thank you for joining. You know, we're trying to bring in more people like Daniel that do actual work instead of, me that I get to live in a pretend world and say like, well, why do you do your project that way? And why do you do it this way? So this week, we're going to talk about templates. Daniel, if you want to just give a little bit of your background, project management wise and MSP wise, I think that would be helpful for everybody.
Yeah, definitely, Lewis. Thanks. So I think it might help to start with a little bit of context around Mainstay and what Mainstay does. So Mainstay, we're an MSP. We operate in New England. So and we help with IT, cybersecurity. We're jumping into the AI space as a lot of MSPs are. And we provide these services to a number of different organizations. So this is law firms, manufacturing, healthcare, you name it. It's really just a wide breadth of focus. So that's what we do, but we have a key philosophy at Mainstay, and that's really to use the intersection of work, technology, and business to help people flourish. And so that's really our focus, and that's my focus with projects is this isn't really just a fun tagline. It's like this drives my motivation behind projects with organizations. Is I really want to produce a project and run a project and close a project that is going to help that organization flourish. I want to do that in the best way possible. So that's sort of my driving motivation as a project manager at Mainstay. I'm currently the only project manager at Mainstay, and through that, I manage between 60 to 90 projects fully. I'm currently, I think I've got 80 active projects that we're running with now. And that spans from a wide different range. So this could be backup migrations, MDM projects, Office 365 migrations, you name it. There's a lot of different pieces that we have running through. And so my focus is really just to help with the cohesion between our organization, Mainstay, and the client to make sure that we're hitting those success measures. We've got a strong timeline that we're tracking on. Any change orders are communicated. There's a lot of different pieces within that, but it's basically bringing the teams together, making sure we get the work accomplished, providing visibility, and then at the end of the day, closing out the project and having that sense of, all right, we did something positive. There was an increase in, what for backup projects, it's not as noticeable, but we see it in the back end. But that there is really just this win-win for both Mainstay and the people that we provide service to. So yeah, that's a little bit about project management with us.
That's awesome. So, and a little bit about you too, right? I know you said earlier as people were coming in, grew up in South Africa. Was it like, all right, you grew up, you were a kid and you thought, man, I really want to manage projects and when I grow up, and the place to do that is New Hampshire. And that's why you ended up in New Hampshire. So just how did you get into Mainstay in the MSP space and or project management?
Yeah, so I started out actually working more in our client services realm. So I did a lot of just initial integration for prospects interested in Mainstay and Mainstay services. I naturally gravitated towards the operational side of things with that. So we started a revenue operations department, and I started working into that. And I was working with our business development team, our marketing team, and operations all together to sort of put the pieces where they needed to be. And at the time, we had a growing engineering department, and the engineers themselves were basically project managing their own projects. So there was this missing piece that was happening there. And engineers are very focused on the work that needs to be done, but the high level, like how many hours did I spend? What was the budget looking like? Are we profitable? That's a whole extra section of work that really requires its own frame of reference and field. So the position started forming. I was really interested in it, and the spot really just opened up. So it became an area that I think was within my zone of genius. I really just clicked with it. I'm quite organized as a person, but I also really enjoy connecting with different people and engaging with different people. And so project management has really been the best fit for me for the years that I've worked in that space. It's been I started at Mainstay about 7 years ago. It's been about 4 years in project management.
Yeah. And I know you were a little humble earlier. You said up to 90 projects. I have seen where you're over 100 for sure at a point. I think there's another point too, and we will dive into templates, everybody, but I do always find that it's helpful to understand. You did a great job explaining there, Daniel, kind of how project management evolved for the organization. So I know at a certain point as well too, y'all started to have another resource do a little bit more project coordination. Do you have a feel for at what point that happened? Was it when you got to 60, 70, 80 projects, or how did the team make that distinction?
Yeah, it wasn't really around number of projects. I think it was more related to what project management is, and splitting that into its specific buckets. And I think the overall management of a project ties more into the areas of, what is our profitability looking like? Are we communicating with the client and coordinating with them effectively, and kind of looking at all of that in our projects at a high level. And then the coordination side of things came as we need somebody to actually put those tasks on calendars. And if those tasks get missed, to reschedule those tasks. It's very needed and a very important role, but also something that takes a lot of time and doesn't really fit solidly under that management umbrella, I would say. And so that's where we started breaking that up. And so we have a project coordinator on our team that does a lot of the scheduling for engineers, books up calendars, does some basic client communication too, to make sure schedules are confirmed. And so that's been quite a big help for us. I've found to manage this many projects, but then kind of split up the buckets.
Yeah, that's great. So a little bit like, call that coordinator a little bit like your dispatcher for the project side, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it, I think. Yeah.
Sweet. All right, so templates. So I'm going to start super simple, and then we'll go from there. And we talk about this a lot about what is a project, right? And making sure your organization defines, number of resources or hours or duration or whatever it is. But as far as a template, how would you, Daniel, define what a template is for projects for Mainstay, and then also, weave into that just what you think a template is, right?
Yeah. Well, I think so. If we take it from templates in general, the first thing that comes to my mind is, all right, you've got an email template. It's a structured set of text that's on a page. You've got a couple highlighted areas where you need to change a word here or there to make sure that it's applicable to whoever you're sending things out to. So we'll start there. I think project templates look similar to that, but with a key difference. And I'll use two analogies. And when I was thinking about this, I thought I couldn't have used two more polar opposite analogies, but I think they're both helpful, so I mentioned them. The first one is the cookie cutters that you pull out on Christmas, the ones that they've got those little forms, they make the little gingerbread men or the whatever your little star or something like that. And so that's one piece. The other one, I got this scene stuck in my head from The Lord of the Rings. I think it's in the Two Towers where the orcs are getting ready to prepare for battle, and there's this one scene where they pour all this molten iron into this massive form for all their swords. You just see the iron kind of float in, and it creates this. It's creating a whole bunch of these swords just because it's flowing into that mold. So I think templates are more like a mold. Project templates are more like a mold. You set them. It's the same. You create your little template mold, and you can fit it into every single project that you're creating, and it looks pretty much the same every time. So I think the other piece of that is this just gives you your baseline, right? For the cookie, you still need to put the icing on there. For the sword, you got to put the handle together. There's a lot of detail that you need to add, but what you're trying to aim for is let's get a baseline, a basic understanding of what my project's going to be, what it's going to look like, and then I can add in details from there.
Eileen, you need to make a note. We might need to get Dan from Intrust, who's been on before, who's a massive Lord of the Rings guy. We might need to do me, Daniel, and Dan, just Lord of the Rings roundtable. But I love it, right? It's repeatable work. You're doing the same thing over and over. It's repeatable work. I think what might be interesting too is earlier you laid out that evolution of what project management looked like at Mainstay. Along that, was there an evolution of templates at Mainstay, right? Was it like, hey, projects were kind of the wild, wild west and they were just happening, and there might have been like a template here and a template there, and one person had a spreadsheet, right? Was there any sort of evolution there?
Yeah, there definitely was. Templates were something that we instituted for some projects, but definitely not all. So, some projects had templates. Some of them were old. They weren't really updated. And often there were times where an engineer would basically run with the project based on notes that they had, predetermined in a spreadsheet somewhere, just like you mentioned. So we started putting them together in, we use ConnectWise as our PSA. We started putting those all together and starting to cultivate this menu of project templates, which is what started us on this journey of really, I think, efficiency and just a better level up in terms of our projects overall. And then from there, projects in ConnectWise, they stop at a certain level of customization, like the templates themselves and the work plan. And so largely one of the reasons we started looking for Movila was because of the amount of extra detail, more icing on the cookie, so to speak, that you could put into a template that would actually drive that efficiency. So it's been sort of a growing search for, having a template that is both as detailed and as repeatable as possible. And I'll say this several times through the webinar. That is like the goal for templates in my mind.
Yeah. What percentage of your projects would you say have a component of a template applied to them?
I would say all of them. I'll say 95%.
That's the correct answer.
Because yeah, right. I mean, the only ones that we don't use are for new projects. And as soon as a new project gets created, we will spin up a template out of that project that we built out of that work plan. And then that will be our standard baseline moving forward. So we always start with building out a template.
Yeah, it's, and as organizations formalize their project management process and structure and all that good stuff, you're going to ultimately do a lot of the same activities on all your projects, right? So even if it's a new type or a new addition to that menu, like you mentioned, right, you're still going to have some sort of kickoff. You still are going to have some sort of wrap up, some sort of billing on that project. So that's what we always say. Good job. I gave the right answer. We always say it 100% of your projects. And we hear it all the time. People come in and they go, wow, we can't use templates. Our stuff is just so custom. We do such custom work for our clients. And then they get in and we'll put two projects next to each other. And you're like, well, you're doing that there and you're doing that there. And why are you making this hard on yourself? And you and I talked about this, and I'm jumping off our outline already, but we were talking about AI and templates, and we were talking about actually just the use of AI, and we were talking about, are you using it? Am I using it? One of my unpopular opinions too, to your email template reference, I don't like email templates. I like to write my emails from start and use them. So that's one of my unpopular opinions. But you referenced using AI to help you with that mental block, right? So it's the same thing with templates. It's, why would you make yourself do something from scratch every single time, right? When you could just make it easier on yourself.
It's a good point too. You mentioned that, you might have some projects that are slightly similar, but varied in different ways. I think it's still a great argument, and we do this all the time at Mainstay, for still using and applying that template. And then you can go through a lessons learned process after that, or let's say a project review. And then you can see and you weigh your opportunity cost, right? Is it worth making a whole separate template for this? Was it that different? Or can I actually just expand my existing template with some extra tasks that encompasses all the different changes, create some more, umbrella type template? And then it's very easy to remove to remove tasks or to remove phases from that template if it's determined that it's not needed. But I usually aim for going for a more robust template, still making it very detailed, but it's not sacrificing a lot on that repeatability. And so I have to kind of constantly flex those levers back and forth to make sure that I'm hitting the right spot. And I think templates are living documents too. I think that, you can't just set a template and then leave it and 4 years go by, especially in this industry, right? It's like, template's useless now. So I think, and we'll probably touch on this a bit later, but after we close each project, our goal is to do a review of that project and the template itself. And if there's any edits that need to be made, we're making those edits to the template after each project closes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I should have probably asked this question earlier. You make a really great point about having it detailed but robust so you can use it on similar types and whatnot. How many templates would you say you have?
We probably have, I was looking at this earlier, I would say we would have between 30 and 40 templates.
Okay.
So it's usually by project type, but we also have a couple that we've decided to break out. We've got, we do Google to Office 365 migrations. but we also do M365 to M365. And it's like, those are slightly different. Two different project types are helpful for something like that. We've also just moved into, with CMMC compliance, cyber security maturity model certification compliance. There's a specific way that migration occurs. And we've just reviewed, and it doesn't make sense to use our normal migration template anymore because there's so many tasks that vary. So, it makes sense to build out a separate template. Yes, it's a little bit more management, but at the same time, I think I'm getting more efficiency out of utilizing that and more accuracy, and it feels overall a bit better for the overall lifespan of the project.
Yeah, it sounds too, just the way you're talking, that even if you're deciding, with Google and Office 365, that it sounds like even when you make that decision, you're using your template to create your other template and then change that other one, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and we'll run it a lot of times that we start with the core, start with the key elements of something, then you change from there. But it's very rare that we're actually building a project from scratch these days, which is a very nice feeling for those of us who have built a project from scratch and know the pain that comes with that.
Yeah. And I think too, because that number you threw out of the number of projects that you're managing at once, that's a high number, right? From what we typically see, that's a high number. And I know there's a lot of variability in there and project size and type and all that sort of stuff, but still that's a lot. And I think the reason that you and Mainstay are able to leverage that is to that comment that you're not building plans from scratch, right? Because a lot of project managers' time that I see goes into, okay, I've got this scope of work. Let me take 2 hours to digest it and figure out what we sold, and then figure out how to build a corresponding work plan. So for you, when you get a scope of work, I apologize, I'm just going off. I'm not following our outline at all here. When you get that scope of work and you have your library of templates there, do you have any consistent process or structure within those documents and those repositories to be like, okay, we sold this, it's this template. We sold this, it's this template. How do you work through that setup?
Yeah, so this is and this is where I'm curious with people that are listening as well. There may be some very different workflows based on how your organization will structure project approvals and the process for that. But I love that there's this information sharing that's going on, because it's important for us to, I think, to get as much varied opinion as possible and then make the best decision based on that. So for us specifically, we actually have engineers that are building out the initial, we would call it like the R&D of the project as a whole, and that looks very similar to what a template would be. So our goal in project management is to match that R&D that the engineer is doing as closely to our template as possible, and then align both of those things so that whenever an engineer produces that scope of work, the work plan that they're getting is basically one-to-one with what they've built out. And the way that we work through these as well is that it's usual that the engineer that has built out and designed the project is the same one that's working on the project. And I know that's not the case, or it can't be the case for a lot of organizations, but we've found that that's just highly improved our consistency across projects. It's also cleared a lot of the confusion around, all right, well, this task, what is it actually for? Now, that being said, I think in terms of scalability, templates will come in really handy because of the amount of information you can put into each template. So my thought and focus for future building is, let's say a random engineer comes in, not familiar with the scope of work that's been designed at all. They're technically capable, but they don't know the process for it. can they still go into that project based on the template that's built out and based on the work plan there and run a successful project? And I think that's where really focusing in on templates and the notes that are inside those templates is going to come in handy.
Yeah, I mean it's smart, right? Because your engineers then, if you're handing it off to a different engineer, you've got a pre-sales department that's doing that, and then it gets handed off to the engineering team. You're essentially doing rediscovery, right? You're then being like, okay, what is going on with the client's network? What did we sell? What do we have to do? If you've already done that, yeah, that's a huge benefit and a huge efficiency gain, I'm sure.
Yeah, it definitely is. And we've had some projects that we had to move over to other engineers, and that's just been the nature of how we've operated.
Yeah.
And the key to consistency there is the fact that when usually the engineer has worked on that project type before, and so they see a familiar work plan, they see a familiar process, they can already kind of align themselves with how this project will run, just because templates and a consistent scope of work make it so that we're not doing something different every single time. And that's
Sure.
I've found when we've had projects that we haven't created a template for, we kind of start back at the drawing board where it's been a year since we've done the project. Now we need to get a meeting together to figure out, all right, well, what was the budget that we had and how did we run through the work plan? And so having those templates, I think, is also just a good check in general to make sure that you're on the same page and you're revisiting things instead of trying to do it from scratch.
Yeah. Yeah. And to that point about revisiting, and you'd mentioned this as well about project review at the end and template review, and again, I live in La La Land, you live in the real world, and we say you should be doing a project review at the end of every project. Hey, how did things go? Do we need to update our template? Do you have a feel for how often you're getting that done on each project? Does it happen? I know it's unrealistic to say it happens on every single project, but what's your strategy there?
Yeah, I'm also aligned with that goal, but it doesn't happen every time. That's for sure. We've actually adjusted our process for closing out projects a little bit since templates have become a renewed focus for us. We used to meet on sort of a lessons learned. If there was anything that went way outside of scope, or we blew the project budget out of the water, or there was just something that was abnormal. And so that would trigger, all right, let's do a lessons learned meeting. Let's figure out what went wrong. What we started implementing is actually a project review meeting. And those are more like a fireside chat, like 15 minutes. And we're really trying to streamline it so that it's not, it doesn't become a extra add-on to each project. It's really just this quick laser focus. Hey, we didn't use any of the time on this task, and that's happened in the past 5 projects. Do we still need this? Should this just be a step or like just on a checklist somewhere? It just doesn't seem like it's necessary. Or we look at some tasks and they're always over budget. And so we look at that and we go, all right, well, do we need 2 separate tasks? Do we need to up the budget on that? So it's very laser focused to the template itself. And then because of how small our project management team is, we can make real-time adjustments to those templates in those meetings. So it makes it a very efficient process. We'll run through, all right, what do we need to change? Is there anything? The other question is more general, but asking the people that actually worked on the project, the whole project team, was there anything that felt clunky about this process? Was there something missing? Was there an issue with maybe too many steps at once, or there wasn't a step there? And based on all of that, we make some adjustments and then we revisit the next time we go through. So my goal is to have it in every single project that closes out. And it could be 5 minutes just saying, this looked good. Yep, everything's fine. We're good to go, but it's just, again, to that templates being living documents, it's something that if we just leave a template, I would say that the one thing worse than building a or let's say building a template from scratch is implementing a 4-year-old template or a 1-year-old template. Like there's so many things you'll miss. There's adjustments that you would need to make. You'll need to delete tasks or re-add tasks, and I think it's less efficient than just building it from scratch. So
Yeah.
if you're using templates, they need to be updated all the time.
Yeah. So in those fireside chats at the end, you've maybe got the project up and the corresponding templates, and you're making those updates in that meeting right then on the fly.
Yeah, sometimes I'll screen share. I'll
Yeah.
open up the template. I'll just say, here's what we've got going on. We use the critical path that Movila offers all the time. So we'll look at that critical path and go, here's how the project ran. This task still isn't closed and the project's done. Like what where are we at with this?
Yeah.
And so those types of things are really helpful for everybody to see, get on the same page, and then we make adjustments right in that meeting. And it's quick. It's like we want it to be as painless as possible, because any extra time on a project, on every single project, adds up.
Yeah, it's like anything else, right? If you sit there and you're like, yeah, we thought this went well or this didn't go well, and we'll update that next week, you never get to it next week. You just don't.
Not for something like that. Yeah, it's small tasks. You can do them quickly, and if they do end up piling up, now you've got like a whole rework of your template to do. And so it's easier to make those living documents. And we get approvals all the time for those projects. So then we know it's changed. The next time this gets approved, we're going to run it differently.
Sure. Perfect. So I'll try to play devil's advocate here a little bit. We've talked about the benefits so far, and the templates are great and we should be using them, right? Any pitfalls or negatives about templates? And you just made a good point too on if it's an old one, that's worse than not using one. What other pitfalls or negatives around templates?
I think there's a couple. I think you have to, again, fit with that model of make templates as detailed and repeatable as possible. If they're just as detailed as possible, then you're going to end up making a new template for every single project. And if they're just repeatable and not at all detailed, you're just going to have your generic kickoff and close phases. You're not going to have the meat of it. So templates have to be done with a certain philosophy in mind, I think. Otherwise, they're going to be frustrating. The other piece is creating templates with details that do change often. So it's like if you were to put in a certain person that's running with a project in a template, but that task could get assigned to a number of different people. I usually try and not put something in a template that I would have to delete often and then re-add with something different, because then I'm starting to lose my efficiency gain.
Yeah, that's a great point. So of the details that you're putting into your templates, what would you say are the must-haves and what would you say are the nice-to-haves?
I actually think I was toying a little bit between what's the essentials of a project template, and I think it goes back to the two analogies, right? It's like you've got your mold for your swords, you've got your cookie cutter. That's really the baseline. You start simple, like there's only a couple things you need. Later on, when that baseline is solid, you can get the stencil for the icing to make that a little bit better and easier to put on. So I take the approach of let's make it as simple as possible so templates are as easy to build as possible. And I think that comes with having really just your tasks and your phases in the right spots, organizing them appropriately. Your tasks, I would say too, there's some guidelines around this. I don't think a task should be any shorter than a half an hour. If you're going to put in a task, if it's any shorter than a half an hour, it just becomes a checkbox, and you should just put that into a bulk task. So that's the first sort of guideline around a task, and then group those by phases, so it's kind of easy to digest them by different stages. It's helpful for me as a project manager to take things one phase at a time as well. so that would be my really the only essentials for building out a project is just have your phases and your tasks in the right spots, and have a good philosophy around what is a task, where should it go. The other thing I'd recommend is we set up kickoff and closure phases for every single project. And it's just what it helps for each project is it makes sure that you're aligned in the beginning. So everybody's got a chance to connect on, all right, we do this every single time for a project. And then at the end, I found that it's hardest for me to manage my end game with projects. Everything is getting close to the close. The client's really happy, but now there's documentation and there's editing and there's these pieces and loose ends to tie up, and we lose momentum. So it's helpful to have a closure phase as well that says, all right, let's document everything. Let's have a project review meeting. Let's make sure that we've got all our ducks in a row before closing everything out. And so those are two key phases that I put in every single project.
Yeah, I love the beginning. The end part's crucial, right? Because that's where stuff gets missed, right? And then you hand off to service, and then they're going to update something, and they have no idea that you've made changes to their network. The kickoff part too, we will talk to a lot of people that say, we tell our clients it's 8 weeks before we can start a project, or it's 10 weeks. And a lot of that is just arbitrary numbers that are made up and put out there. Some people do have, once the customer signs the project, we want a kickoff email to them within a week. We want a internal kickoff within 2 weeks. We want a client kickoff with, all that good stuff. You can build that into your templates, right? So that when you spin up a new project, whether you're giving yourself buffer or this is what you have to do approach, you put that in there, right? So you don't have to think about it. You already know when you tell that customer, hey, we're not going to be looking to have a kickoff call until 2 months down the line, which is this date or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's that's where we start building enough of a template so that we can understand what the timeline is going to be just at its base, right? Like this is how long the project is going to take if everything works and is aligned as it should. And then to your point, Lewis, if now the client has a specific time frame around that, or the client's outlining, here's when I want the kickoff, this is when I want this scheduled. Now you're able to add more variables into your equation, but at least you've got your baseline there. So, we understand generally how long it will take. You can see that from your template. I would say there's a couple things that are not essentials, but very, very helpful to put into a template in order to achieve that equation. But yeah, that then becomes manageable, because instead of going, all right, well, the client wants to push out this date, and I don't know if I have the capacity for it, or they want to speed things up, or the migration's happening on this day. Now it's manageable because you understand what you're working with at a baseline, and you can start to move around some of those pieces. So yeah. I think it's a great point.
So and I'll put you on the spot here with your cookie reference. So if your gingerbread man is your outline, your phases and your tasks, what would you call the icing, and what would you call the gumdrop buttons? Because we have to account for the
everybody needs to have the gumdrop buttons. That's right. Yeah. So there's we'll talk about the icing. I think this is still crucial, because nobody likes a cookie without ice cream or icing, or some like form of something on there. I think durations are really important for each task that you're doing. And then dependencies would be the other piece. And this is what builds a solid timeline. So I was referencing an equation before, and it's like you need your tasks with a duration and a dependency to understand the X variable, which is how long is this project going to take me. So durations being, for this task, over how many days is this task going to be completed? Not necessarily that the task is 10 hours, but is it going to be 10 hours over 2 days or 10 hours over 10 days. So having that filled in per task is really helpful because it starts to build out your timeline for a project. And then the dependencies have been extremely helpful for us as well. And dependencies are basically what needs to be done on this task before the next task can begin. And Movula does a great job putting that into a critical path view, which that helps me out a lot. It helps our team get on the same page with that too. But having both of those in there then creates this critical path with a set timeline based on the duration for each task. So I would say that's really the icing. I think there's probably a couple more pieces. You could start putting in a resource type per task. So what resource type is going to be doing this? You could add billing types. So we work with both a fixed fee model and we have some phases that are time and materials, making sure to tag those so that you can actually identify, how much time are we tracking that's T&M versus how much time we're tracking that's fixed fee. So those are icing. Gumdrop buttons, I think, are some of the fun ones here. Those are ones where sometimes with the project you're going to run into certain risks. So adding risks to a project type that you're going to run into every time, that's helpful just to track on. We have a lot of attachments that we would have for each project. So we would put in attachments into a template. And that's like instructions for how to do the project, documentation. We have some templated documents that we would give to clients as well. So we have all of that at our fingertips. Trying to think if we got to have 3 gumdrop buttons at least. You can't just have 2.
No, I mean, risks are great, right? We don't, to your point, hey, whatever it is, the risk on this is always that we never get the customer's credentials in time, right? So we know it's going to happen. Let's call it out in our template so that when we get into the project, hey, do we have the credentials yet? Yes, no, right? And we can determine our path forward there.
Yeah.
I'll let you off the hook. You don't need 3 because I put you on the spot there. So I think, and I want to be conscious of time. We're already coming up to the hour. Like I said, Daniel and I could go for a long time. Any questions y'all have, please just fire them in there, right? We don't need to continue to listen to ourselves pontificate here. But can attachments for tickets be seen in CW and Movula, or where are they attached? So Daniel, I'll let you answer that one. Or how you're handling it.
We typically use what we started using anyways, because we've got a lot of our attachments actually saved in SharePoint. That's where a lot of the R&D documents from the engineers live, and they'll get attached as well to ConnectWise, but we usually take it from the root source. So we'll have attachments that are living in SharePoint that we usually grab from. So that's where I've used them before. I don't know, Louis, is there a sync between attachments between the two?
There's not with ConnectWise. We've looked at it privacy-wise, sharing attachments. I think we'll look at it at some point. Daniel, you answered exactly how I typically recommend, right? Is if it's instructions, work instructions, or a templatized document that you're going to kick over to the customer, have it live in SharePoint wherever you have that, so you can always access it, and then just drop those links into the template in Movula. We've got some people that add them as attachments if they don't need to access those in ConnectWise. We have others that drop those links right into the description, which you could then pull from either system. And then we have some that you can actually add notes to templates too in Movula. So we have some people that drop them in notes, or even the Movula steps, which sync to the tasks. So we've got a couple people that do it a couple different ways. Colleen came on, so she looks like usually when she does that, she's getting ready to reprimand me because I've done something.
No, you sure that I had time to tell everyone about next week's webinar, but we have a couple more minutes for more questions if anyone has them.
Yeah, and I've got another one in there too that I think is important. So Daniel, and I mentioned AI, and you and I were talking about AI. How do you go whichever direction you want on this one, honestly. How have you used AI with your templates? How would you like to use AI with your templates? What's your opinions around AI and templates and those two things together?
Yeah, well, like we were talking about before, I think it's a good way to, especially for a new project type, to kind of brainstorm a bit. If I'm not sure where to start, I'll pop in a couple of documents into a GPT, and I'll have it kind of run through and give me spit out a couple ideas around some key phases and tasks. But I think I do think with the advancement in AI, we could start to utilize it for more like big picture assessment for project templates. Go something like, have the GPT analyze specifically your templates as they've been used across the past 5 years, and say, all right, where am I seeing some inefficiencies in projects in tasks that have not been closed in time, and tasks that haven't been used, and are there any recommendations around adjusting the task or moving things around? That might be interesting. I'd be curious to see how AI starts to work with the amount of data that comes into projects templates specifically. I know that with Movila, we've started to utilize the power of analyzing templates across really now, I think it's about 2 years worth of templates, and we've started looking at each task and how much time the task has taken based on the budget, and that's been really insightful for us. And so I think AI might be able to utilize that information and data and make recommendations based on that, and quick changes as well. So it's nice to see it from a high level. I think take a whole bunch of data, analyze it, make recommendations, and prompt to make a template more efficient.
To me, I couldn't agree more about the brainstorming, right? It's always writer's block or whatever you want to call it. That's always been a big problem for me, and that's where I like to use it. Again, it's a millionth time I've said it. I live in La La Land. Someone asked me a question like, hey, how would you set up a template for a Meraki firewall? And that's probably not even a brand and piece of equipment that goes together. But you can throw that into a GPT and be like, hey, I'm starting to build a template for I'm an MSP, the project size is about this. Can you please give me some recommendations? And it'll go out, it'll find work instructions from the manufacturer's websites and manuals and pull that in for you and consolidate it, right? So it is it's a good tool to help brainstorm with. I think what would be interesting is, you mentioned your fireside chats, Daniel, where you bring all those contributors from the project, who scoped it, who worked it, you may be a customer service rep, and you're doing a lot of that analyzing, internally. I'd be curious to see how AI could then be incorporated there, and then go out and search what you've done and make those recommendations and just further help refine those templates and just keep making them better and better. And, I know we're coming up on time, so Colleen, I'll make sure I give you minutes. But Daniel, I just want to say thank you. I think you said something at the beginning of this that really resonated for me, is that your focus and Mainstay's focus is that when projects end, they're positive for customers, right? And we all know in the project management world, that's hard to make happen. And, I just appreciate you giving your insight today and all the feedback you have about templates. We know you're busy, so we appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. Thanks for having me on. And despite all your humility and saying you live in La La Land, you've been a massive help to us and to Mainstay around charting this course for better projects and better templates. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming on. If you want to tune in next month, we have another webinar coming up, and it's going to be on, that's me doing a drum roll, project risk management, how to catch issues before they catch you. It's going to be Lewis talking with Bucky. He's the VP of operations at Movila, if you guys don't know who Bucky is. And it's going to be fun. We're going to talk about risk management in your projects and maybe a little bit about what RPACS is. So if you have questions about RPACS, bring them to next month's webinar. That's going to be Friday, August 22nd at 1 p.m. and we're Eastern time here, so 1 p.m. Eastern time. What else do I have for you? Oh, yes. There's a survey when you close out of this webinar. It's like 2 questions, super quick. If you could give us feedback or have any like, oh my gosh, I need to hear about this topic on a webinar, please let us know in the survey. And also let me know if you think my shirt is purple or gray, because apparently this
Gray.
is gray,
It's great.
but it's
Gray.
purple.
It's because we're millennials. Everything's gray and blue.
Oh,
Or monochrome.
whatever.
Yeah.
All right, you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for joining this webinar today. And yeah, please fill out the survey. See you next month.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Thanks,
Take
Daniel.
care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.